I'm just your friend, aren't I? Taehyung asked, his voice barely audible beneath the roar of the ocean, while Jimin sat beside Jungkook and laughed as if those words had never existed. The question hung in the warm night air. Jimin stopped laughing. Jungkook slowly turned his head. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The beach house behind them was alive with music, voices, and the smell of grilled food drifting through the open windows, but the three men standing beneath the dim terrace lights seemed completely separated from the celebration. Taehyung forced a smile. It was the same smile he had used all evening whenever someone asked if he was tired. I was joking, he said. Jimin stared at him. You don't look like you're joking. Looked away toward the black ocean. Moonlight scattered across the waves, silver and broken, like pieces of something beautiful that had already been shattered. I said I'm fine. You always say that. Jimin's voice was gentle, that somehow made it worse. Taehyung swallowed. He had spent the entire day telling himself that he was imagining things. He had told himself that it meant nothing when Jimin chose the seat beside Jungkook on the bus. It meant nothing when Jimin leaned against Jungkook's shoulder during the long drive. It meant nothing when Jungkook quietly handed Jimin his jacket because the evening wind had become cold. And it definitely meant nothing when Jimin laughed so hard at something Jungkook whispered that he had nearly dropped his drink. Taehyung had watched every moment, every single one. And every time he had smiled. That was what frightened him, because Taehyung knew how to hide sadness. He knew how to hide anger, but jealousy was different. Jealousy lived in his body before it reached his face. It tightened his fingers, changed his breathing, made him suddenly aware of every distance between himself and the person he wanted to be closest to. And tonight, that distance felt enormous. Jimin took one step toward him. Taehyung. Taehyung immediately stepped backward. Don't. Jimin froze. Don't what? Don't look at me like that. What? Like you already know what's wrong. Remained silent. He could see something Jimin couldn't. Taehyung wasn't angry, he was scared. Jungkook lowered his gaze. Perhaps that was why he quietly walked back toward the house. Jimin noticed. Jungkook, it's okay, Jungkook said softly. I'll leave you two alone. Glass door slid shut behind him. Taehyung watched his silhouette disappear into the warm light, then he laughed bitterly. See, Jimin frowned. See what? You always choose him. The words escaped before Taehyung could stop them. Silence returned. Jimin's expression changed. That's not fair. I know. You're acting like I did something wrong. I know. Then why are you doing this? Taehyung closed his eyes. Because I don't know how to tell you that watching you love someone else hurts. Because I don't know whether I'm allowed to want something more. Because I'm terrified that if I tell you the truth, I won't even have your friendship anymore. But he said none of those things. Instead, he whispered, because I'm tired. Jimin's anger softened. Tired of what? Taehyung looked at him. For one fragile second, there was no smile on his face, no teasing. No carefully constructed confidence, only honesty. Being the person you remember when everyone else leaves. Jimin's lips parted. Taehyung immediately looked away. He regretted saying it. The ocean crashed against the shore once, twice, 3 times. Then Jimin said quietly, you were never that person. Looked back. What? You were never someone I remembered only when everyone else left. Stepped closer. You were always there. Taehyung's chest tightened. Then why does it feel like I'm losing you? Jimin didn't answer immediately, because he didn't know how. The truth was complicated. He cared about Jungkook deeply. He also cared about Taehyung in a way he had never learned how to name. For years, their friendship had been built from small things, shared headphones, late-night conversations, inside jokes nobody else understood, quiet meals when everyone was too exhausted to talk. Taehyung knew which drink Jimin ordered when he was nervous. He knew Jimin touched his necklace whenever he was hiding something. He knew Jimin smiled differently when he was genuinely happy. And Jimin knew Taehyung's habits too. The way Taehyung hummed when he cooked. The way he rubbed the back of his neck whenever he felt embarrassed. The way he stared at the floor whenever he wanted to cry. They knew each other too well. Perhaps that was why neither of them had noticed when friendship began becoming something more dangerous. Something neither had the courage to name. Behind the glass door, Jungkook watched them from a distance. He didn't feel angry. He felt guilty, because he had noticed Taehyung's jealousy weeks ago. He had noticed the way Taehyung's expression changed whenever Jimin touched his arm. He had noticed the way Taehyung became unusually quiet whenever Jimin and Jungkook were alone together. But he had never said anything, not because he wanted to hurt Taehyung, because he was afraid of being wrong. Now he knew he hadn't been wrong. Jungkook quietly placed his glass on the table. Someone called his name from inside. He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled his phone from his pocket. A new message appeared, unknown number. Jungkook frowned. The message contained only one sentence. You should stop pretending you don't know what Taehyung is hiding. Jungkook's smile disappeared. He stared at the screen. Another message arrived. If Jimin finds out, everything changes. Jungkook immediately looked toward the terrace. Jimin and Taehyung were still talking. Neither had noticed him. Jungkook's fingers tightened around the phone. Someone was watching them, and apparently someone knew something he didn't. Outside, Taehyung finally sat down on the wooden steps. Jimin sat beside him, not too close, not too far. The space between them felt heavier than the silence. I don't want to lose you, Jimin whispered. Taehyung stared at the ocean. You won't. You don't know that. No, Taehyung smiled sadly. I don't. Turned toward him. Then tell me what you want. Taehyung's heart pounded. There it was, the question he had been avoiding, the question that could destroy everything. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Jimin waited. Taehyung looked at him, and for the first time that night, he stopped pretending. I want. His voice broke. Jimin leaned closer. What? Taehyung's eyes filled with tears. I want you to look at me the way you look at him. Jimin stopped breathing. Taehyung immediately looked away. I know it's selfish. No, I know I'm supposed to be happy for you. Taehyung. I tried. His voice became quieter. I really tried. Jimin's eyes softened. Taehyung wiped his cheek quickly before the tear could fall. I watched you sit beside him. I watched you laugh with him. I watched you hold onto his sleeve when you were cold. And every time. I told myself I was your friend. Laughed softly. Tonight I realized I don't know how to be just your friend anymore. Stared at him. The words hurt because they sounded honest, not dramatic, not manipulative, just painfully honest. Jimin reached for Taehyung's hand. Taehyung looked down at their fingers for a moment. Neither moved. Then Jimin gently held his hand. You should have told me. I was afraid. Of me? Of losing you. Jimin's fingers tightened. You already had me. Looked at him. And you still do. Ocean continued moving in the darkness. Inside the house, the music suddenly changed. Someone laughed loudly. The vacation continued around them as if nothing had happened. But for Taehyung and Jimin, everything had changed. Neither of them noticed Jungkook standing behind the glass door. He had heard enough. And he was holding the phone containing a secret that could change all three of their lives. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight spilling across the beach. Jimin woke earlier than usual. He couldn't remember sleeping. His mind kept returning to Taehyung's confession. I don't know how to be just your friend anymore. Jimin sat on the edge of the bed and stared through the window. The sea was calm. Too calm. He remembered the way Taehyung had looked at him. There had been no accusation in his eyes, only fear. A soft knock came from the door. Jimin turned. Jungkook entered. Are you awake? Yeah. Jungkook closed the door. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he placed his phone on the table. We need to talk. Jimin noticed his expression. What happened? Jungkook looked at him. Someone sent me a message last night. Jimin's face changed. What message? Jungkook hesitated, then he turned the screen toward him. Jimin read it. His stomach dropped. You should stop pretending you don't know what Taehyung is hiding. He looked up. Who sent this? I don't know. You reply. No, why not? Because I wanted to know what they wanted first. Stared at the screen. Another notification appeared. Both of them watched it arrive. This time there was a photograph attached. Jungkook opened it. Jimin's breath caught. The photograph had been taken the previous evening. It showed Jimin and Taehyung sitting on the terrace. Their hands were intertwined. The angle made it obvious that whoever took the photograph had been standing near the beach. Someone had been watching them. Jimin stood abruptly. Where is Taehyung? Jungkook looked toward the window. He went for a walk. Grabbed his jacket. I need to find him. Caught his arm. Jimin, wait. What? Look at the photo again. Jimin did. There was something in the background, a figure barely visible behind a palm tree. Jungkook zoomed in. Both men stared. The figure was holding a camera. Jimin's expression hardened. This isn't about jealousy anymore. No, Jungkook said quietly. It isn't. Far down the beach, Taehyung stopped walking. He felt something in his pocket vibrate. He pulled out his phone. One message. You finally told him how you feel. Taehyung's face went pale. A second message followed. Now let's see what he does with the truth. Taehyung looked back toward the beach house. Jimin was standing outside, watching him. For the first time, Taehyung understood that whatever had been happening around them was not an accident. Someone had been watching, someone knew his secret. And someone was waiting to see how Jimin would react. Taehyung slowly lowered his phone. Then Jimin began walking toward him, not angry, not afraid, determined. Taehyung waited. When Jimin finally reached him, he stopped only inches away. I know, Jimin whispered. Taehyung's eyes widened. You know what? What you've been hiding. Taehyung's heart sank, but before he could answer, Jimin reached for his hand. I don't know what happens next, stared at their joined hands. I know one thing, Jimin continued. You don't have to be afraid of losing me. Looked into his eyes. For once, there was no jealousy between them, no competition, no pretending. Only two people standing at the edge of a truth they had avoided for far too long. And behind them, somewhere beyond the line of palm trees, a camera lens quietly disappeared into the shadows. The camera lens disappeared behind the palm trees, but Jimin could still feel the unseen gaze following them. Taehyung, he whispered, tightening his grip around his hand. We need to go back. Taehyung didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the distant trees. You saw it too, Jimin nodded. Someone was there. A cold breeze moved across the beach. The peaceful morning suddenly felt wrong. Taehyung slowly pulled his phone from his pocket and showed Jimin the message. You finally told him how you feel. Jimin read it twice. His expression hardened. When did you get this? 30 seconds before you came. You tell Jungkook? No. Why? Taehyung looked down. Because I didn't want him involved. Jimin's eyebrows drew together. He's already involved. I know. So am I. Taehyung looked at him. I never wanted this. I know. You shouldn't have to deal with my feelings and some stranger watching us. Stepped closer. Stop deciding what I can handle. Taehyung went silent. Jimin rarely spoke to him like that, not angrily, but firmly. It reminded Taehyung of all the times Jimin had protected him without making a big deal about it. The first time Taehyung had gotten sick during a trip, Jimin had stayed awake beside his bed. The time Taehyung had been overwhelmed by a crowded event, Jimin had silently led him outside. The countless nights when Taehyung couldn't sleep, Jimin had sent him ridiculous pictures until he finally laughed. Maybe Taehyung had misunderstood their entire relationship. Maybe the distance he feared had never really existed. Come on, Jimin said. They walked back toward the house. Jungkook was waiting outside. He immediately looked at their hands. His expression changed for only a second. Then he smiled. Did you find anything? No, Jimin answered. Jungkook looked at Taehyung. You. Taehyung shook his head. Jungkook nodded. Then we need to figure out who took that picture. The three of them went inside. The cheerful atmosphere from the previous night was gone. Their friends were still sleeping or preparing breakfast, unaware of what had happened. Jungkook locked the door. Let's keep this between us for now. Jimin nodded. Taehyung sat on the sofa. He looked exhausted. Jimin noticed immediately. You haven't slept. Taehyung shrugged. Neither have you. Jimin sat beside him. Jungkook watched them from across the room. There was no jealousy in his expression, only concern. You two should talk, he said. Taehyung looked surprised. Jungkook continued. I'll check the cameras outside. Wait, Jimin said. Jungkook stopped. Careful. I will. He left. Silence filled the room. Taehyung stared at his hands. Are you angry? Jimin shook his head. Confused. That makes two of us. Jimin smiled faintly. Do you remember when we first met? Taehyung laughed quietly. You thought I was intimidating. You were. I was shy. You hid behind the others. Taehyung smiled. You noticed? I always noticed you. Smile disappeared from Taehyung's face. Jimin realized what he had said. Neither spoke. Outside, footsteps moved across the wooden deck. Jungkook returned. There's something strange. Stood. What? The camera system has a blind spot. Taehyung frowned. Where? Exactly where the photograph was taken. Jungkook showed them the security footage. The screen showed the beach. People walked past. The ocean moved. Palm trees swayed. Then the footage skipped. 3 minutes disappeared. Jimin stared. Can someone erase footage like that? Someone who knows the system. Taehyung's expression changed. This wasn't random. No, Jungkook said. It wasn't. A sudden knock came from the front door. Everyone froze. Nobody spoke. Another knock. 3 slow knocks. Jimin looked at Jungkook. Jungkook silently moved toward the door. Taehyung grabbed his wrist. Open it. Jungkook stopped. The knocking came again. This time, a voice followed. Taehyung? Taehyung's face went pale. He knew that voice. Jimin noticed. Who is it? Taehyung didn't answer. The voice came again. Taehyung, I know you're inside. Looked at him. Who? Taehyung slowly stepped backward. His breathing became uneven. I haven't heard that voice in years. Jimin moved closer. What are you talking about? Taehyung stared at the door. Then the person outside said something that made the blood drain from his face. You really thought your secret would stay buried forever? The room fell silent. Jimin looked at Taehyung. Taehyung couldn't speak. Because the voice outside belonged to someone from his past, someone he had promised himself he would never see again. And suddenly, the jealousy that had consumed him the night before seemed like the smallest problem they had.
Taehyung stared at the door as though it had become a wall between his present and everything he had spent years trying to forget. Who is it? Jimin asked again. Taehyung didn't answer. The person outside knocked once more. Taehyung opened the door, stepped closer to him. You know them, swallowed. Yes. Who? Taehyung finally looked at Jimin. His eyes were filled with something Jimin had never seen before. Fear, not the fear of losing a friendship, not jealousy, something much older, something deeply buried. His name is Minyi. Jimin frowned. Who is Minyi? Taehyung rubbed his thumb against the edge of his phone, a nervous habit Jimin recognized immediately. Someone I knew before all of this. Of this, Taehyung looked toward the door. Before I became who you know. Silence that followed felt heavier than the ocean outside. Jungkook glanced at Jimin. I'm going to open the door. Taehyung immediately grabbed his arm. No, Jungkook looked at him. Why? Because he doesn't want to talk to you. Then who does he want? Taehyung's eyes shifted toward Jimin. Me. Jimin's chest tightened. The door suddenly rattled. Taehyung. Jimin stepped closer. Open it. Looked at him. Why? Because you look terrified. Gave a weak smile. I am. Reached for his hand. Taehyung looked down at their fingers. The gesture was simple, but it gave him enough courage to breathe. Stay behind me, he whispered. Jimin shook his head. No, Jimin. I said no. Sighed. Neither of you is staying behind anyone. Toward the door. I'm opening it. Taehyung didn't stop him this time. The lock clicked. The door opened. A man stood outside wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He looked older than Taehyung remembered. His face was calm, too calm. His eyes immediately found Taehyung. You've changed. Said nothing. Minyi smiled. You still look scared when you're nervous. Stepped forward. Who are you? Minyi looked at him, then at their intertwined hands. His smile disappeared. It's true. Taehyung's body stiffened. Leave. I only came to talk. You shouldn't have come. Minyi laughed softly. You said that 8 years ago too. Looked at Taehyung. 8 years. Taehyung lowered his head. Minyi stepped closer. You never told them, did you? Stop. Never told them why you disappeared. Stop. You never told them what happened that night. Jungkook's expression hardened. What night? Minyi looked at him. You really don't know. No, Minyi smiled. Interesting. Taehyung suddenly moved toward him. Leave now. Minyi didn't move. Instead, he pulled an envelope from his jacket. He held it out. This belongs to you. Stared at it. His face became pale. Jimin noticed. What is that? Taehyung didn't answer. Minyi extended the envelope again. You should have opened it years ago. Taehyung's hand trembled. He took it. Minyi turned around. Wait, Jungkook said. Minyi stopped. Why are you contacting him now? Minyi looked over his shoulder. Because someone else found out. Jungkook's expression changed. Who? Minyi smiled. You'll know soon enough. Then he walked away. Jungkook immediately stepped outside. I'm following him. Grabbed his shoulder. No, Jungkook turned. Why? Because he wants you to. Jungkook stopped. Taehyung stared at the envelope. His fingers were shaking. Jimin came closer. Open it. Shook his head. I can't. Why? Because everything changes if I do. Jimin's voice softened. Maybe everything needs to change. Looked at him. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Taehyung stared at him for a long time. Then he opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Jimin leaned closer. The photograph showed Taehyung standing beside Minyi years ago. They looked much younger. But that wasn't what shocked Jimin. Behind them stood another person. Someone Jimin recognized immediately. Jungkook. His face was partially hidden, but there was no mistaking him. Jungkook stared at the photograph. I wasn't there. Looked at him. You were. No. Jungkook took the photograph. He examined it closely. Never seen this place. Taehyung's voice trembled. You don't remember? Jungkook looked at him. Remember what? Taehyung closed his eyes. The accident. Felt his stomach drop. What accident? Taehyung couldn't answer. Jungkook stared at the photograph. Slowly something changed in his expression. A memory, a sound, rain hitting a windshield, headlights cutting through darkness, someone shouting his name. Then nothing. Jungkook stepped backward. His breathing became uneven. I remember the road. Moved toward him. Jungkook, I remember. He touched his forehead. The rain. Looked devastated. I told you not to come back. Stared at him. You knew. Taehyung's eyes filled with tears. I knew everything. Stood between them. What happened? Neither answered. Then Jungkook suddenly noticed something written on the back of the photograph, a date 8 years ago, and beneath it 4 words, we all survived for a reason. Jimin stared at the sentence. Taehyung slowly sat down, his hands covered his face. Jungkook remained frozen, then Jimin looked at Taehyung. Tell me the truth. Taehyung lowered his hands. For years he had protected the secret because he believed silence could protect the people he loved. But now the secret had followed them into their vacation. It had found Jimin, it had found Jungkook, and it had finally found him. Taehyung took a deep breath. That night wasn't an accident. Jimin's heart stopped. Jungkook stared at him. What are you saying? Taehyung looked toward the window. His voice became almost inaudible. Someone caused it. Jimin's eyes widened. Who? Taehyung looked back at them. I don't know. A long silence followed, then his phone vibrated. Everyone looked at the screen. One new message. You should have told them sooner. Taehyung opened it. A photograph appeared. It showed the 3 of them standing inside the beach house only minutes earlier, taken from outside. Underneath the photograph was a single sentence. Now you know the past. Next, you'll learn why Jimin was involved. Taehyung's blood ran cold. Jimin stared at the screen. What does that mean? Taehyung slowly looked at him. I don't know. Somewhere deep inside, he already feared the answer, because if Jimin had been connected to that night too, then the friendship they had built over all those years might have been based on a truth none of them had ever known. The photograph remained on the screen between them, its cold light illuminating three faces that suddenly looked like strangers to one another. Jimin was the first to speak. What does it mean that I was involved? Taehyung lowered his phone. I don't know. Just said you don't know. I said I don't know the whole truth, stared at him. Then tell me what you do know. Looked toward the window. Outside, the sea moved beneath the morning sun, beautiful and indifferent. I remember the night of the accident, he said quietly. Not everything, only pieces. Jungkook sat down slowly. What pieces? Rain, a road near the mountains, a broken headlight, someone screaming. Taehyung paused. Jimin's face went pale. Me. You were there, I don't remember. I know. Jimin touched his temple. A strange pressure had begun behind his eyes. He closed them for a moment. There was only darkness, then something flashed. A car, wet pavement. Taehyung shouting, Jungkook standing in the rain, and his own hands covered in blood. Jimin opened his eyes sharply. Jungkook immediately stood. What did you see? Jimin breathed heavily. I don't know. Approached him. Jimin, I saw a car. Taehyung froze. Was it black? Jimin nodded. Did you see the headlights? Yes. Taehyung's expression changed. You remember? Jimin looked at him. I remember being afraid. Stood completely still. What happened after that? Jimin shook his head. I don't know. Taehyung gently placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to force yourself. Looked at him. Why didn't you tell me? Taehyung's eyes dropped. Because you forgot. That isn't an answer. You were unconscious for 2 days. Jimin's expression changed. 2 days, Taehyung nodded. After the accident, your family didn't want anyone talking about it. Jungkook frowned. Family, Taehyung looked at him. Yours too. Jungkook's breathing became slower, so everyone knew except me. No, Taehyung shook his head. Everyone, then who knew? Taehyung hesitated. Minyi. Looked toward the door, that's why he's here. Yes, Jimin sat down, his mind was racing. For years he had believed his friendship with Taehyung and Jungkook had simply grown naturally. They had shared laughter, arguments, long journeys, quiet moments. But now a terrible possibility had appeared. Maybe their lives had crossed long before they remembered. Maybe their friendship had begun with a tragedy none of them understood. Jungkook walked toward the window. Why did I forget? Taehyung answered softly. Because your head was injured. That doesn't explain everything. No, looked at him. There was something else. Jungkook turned. What? You were told not to ask questions. Whom? Taehyung didn't answer. Jungkook's voice hardened. Taehyung. I was 17. So was I was scared. So was I. Taehyung closed his eyes, and that's exactly why I kept quiet. Looked between them. Stop blaming yourselves. Both men looked at him. Jimin's voice trembled, but he continued. We were young. Whatever happened wasn't our fault. Taehyung stared at him. For years he had believed that he had failed everyone. He had believed that silence was cowardice. He had believed that protecting the secret made him responsible for it. But Jimin's words touched something he had buried too deeply. You always do that, Taehyung whispered. What? Make me feel like I don't have to carry everything alone. Jimin's expression softened. You don't. Jungkook watched them silently. The jealousy that might once have existed inside him had disappeared. He finally understood something. Taehyung hadn't been jealous because he wanted to take Jimin away from him. He had been afraid that there was no place left for him beside Jimin. Jungkook walked over and sat beside them. You know what? Taehyung looked at him. I owe you an apology. Taehyung blinked. For what? For making you feel like you had to compete with me. Taehyung's eyes widened. Jungkook gave a small smile. I never wanted that. Looked away. I know. No, you didn't. Jungkook's voice became softer. I'm sorry. Looked at both of them. For the first time since the mystery began, the room felt slightly warmer. Then Taehyung laughed quietly. You're making this more emotional than it needs to be. Smiled. You cried 5 minutes ago. I did not. You absolutely did. Jimin laughed. Taehyung looked at him. That laugh, that familiar laugh. It was the same sound that had made him fall for Jimin long before he understood what was happening. But this time he didn't feel jealous. He simply felt grateful that Jimin was still beside him. Later that afternoon, the three of them left the beach house. They drove toward the mountain road where the accident had happened. The farther they travelled, the quieter Taehyung became. The road narrowed. Trees crowded both sides. Rain began falling lightly against the windshield. Jimin noticed Taehyung gripping the seatbelt. You okay? Yeah. You're lying. Taehyung smiled faintly. You've always been too observant. Drove more slowly. Tell us when to stop. Taehyung nodded. A few minutes later he suddenly pointed. There. Jungkook pulled over. They stepped out into the rain. The place looked completely different from Taehyung's memory. The trees were taller, the road had been repaired, but the old stone barrier was still there. Taehyung walked toward it. His breathing became shallow. This is where it happened. stood beside him. Are you sure? Yes, Jungkook examined the road. Where was the other car? Taehyung pointed toward a bend. There. Suddenly froze, his eyes locked on the trees, something about that place felt familiar. He walked slowly toward the edge of the road. Jimin. He didn't answer. There was an old metal sign half buried beneath the grass. Jimin crouched and brushed away the dirt. Underneath was a faded symbol, 3 lines forming a circle. Jungkook stared at it. I've seen that before. Taehyung turned. The photograph. Jungkook took the old photograph from his pocket. The same symbol was visible on a building behind their younger selves. Jimin looked at Taehyung. What is it? Taehyung shook his head. I don't know. A sound came from the trees. All 3 turned. Nothing, only rain. Jungkook moved closer to the forest. Someone's been here. Pointed toward fresh footprints in the mud. They disappeared between the trees. Jimin looked at Taehyung. Do you think it's Minyi? No. Minyi would want us to know he was here. Taehyung stared into the forest. This person doesn't. They returned to the car before the rain became heavier. On the drive back, nobody spoke. Jimin looked through the window. He kept thinking about the symbol, then he remembered something. A tiny room, a wooden table, a photograph, someone telling him, don't tell Taehyung. His heart began pounding. Stop the car. Jungkook immediately slowed. What happened? Jimin turned toward them. I remember something. Looked at him. What? Jimin swallowed. The night before the accident. Taehyung's face changed. What about it? I wasn't with you. Jungkook frowned. Where were you? Jimin looked down at his hands. I was meeting someone. Who? Jimin closed his eyes. He could almost hear the voice again, a man's voice, calm, familiar, and then the memory became clear enough to hurt. I was meeting Minyi. Stared at him, Jimin slowly looked up. I think he was the one who warned me about the accident before it happened. The car became completely silent. Jungkook tightened his hands around the steering wheel. Taehyung looked at Jimin, not with suspicion, but with fear. What did he warn you about? Jimin struggled to remember. Then he whispered the words he had heard 8 years ago. He told me. Jimin's voice broke. He told me not to trust the person driving the car.